Iowa's News Now Sports has your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
You know, it's not an official blackout, but we will be in black Friday night game. Why not? So if the fans want to jump in there with us, we'd really appreciate that. I think it'd be great, and should be a great environment. Might be a little toasty, or chilly, I should say. So bring your hot chocolate.
Put it on a T-shirt, Ray Gun. Bring your hot chocolate, and it should be. I think it is an official blackout now. Sounded like Hawkeye Football Notes had put the map out, you know, the seating chart of here, wear black if you're anywhere inside Kinnick Stadium.
Seating chart's a little redundant, right? Like, you know.
There you go, yeah. I mean, just, you know, very easy instructions.
109, black, I guess.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. You know, it's more charcoal than anything. But anyways, welcome to an early Friday edition, or Wednesday edition, ahead of Black Friday of Eye on the Hawks, getting ready for that Hawkeye and Cornhusker matchup coming up Friday night at 6:30 on NBC. It won't be toasty, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Thanks to everybody who's tuning in early on this Wednesday, 10 a.m. on the Iowa's News Now YouTube channel. Lots going on today, so we're kicking things off a little bit early. Thanks for following on Eye on the Hawks on Twitter, and of course the Iowa's News Now YouTube channel. You're already watching that here, but also Iowa's News Now on Instagram. We've got the reels up there to follow everything. Lots to talk about today. Certainly the quarterback situation. Jackson Stratton is your guy, but the room is a little healthier than it was 5, 6, 7 days ago. We'll take a look at the Cornhuskers and how they're doing under Mount Pleasant native and new offensive coordinator Dana Holgorsen and his air raid version of the air raid that he learned at Iowa Wesleyan from all those great guys. We're going to Hawkeye highlight Mason Richman, a guy who has played a lot of football for the Hawks. He and Owen had a wonderful conversation about his connection to the Nebraska rivalry. And we'll look back at the class that came back, all those sixth-year guys, fifth and sixth-year guys on the Hawkeye defense. What is their legacy? We'll talk about that. But like we do with a lot of Iowa's News Now newscasts, we are going to kick things off today with our weather first forecast. And I think for the first time in history, if you're watching on the live stream, we're going to cut from camera 4 to camera 5. Chief Meteorologist Rebecca Kolpman here, because as we've talked about, well, how are you this morning? Let's start with that.
I'm doing fine. It's this will be the warmest day that we have for the next 7 days. Is that exciting?
Boy, that's bearer of great news right off the bat. So we've talked for a week now that this was looking like it could beat out 2013 as the coldest game at Kinnick Stadium. This is a rivalry. You did a lot of research.
I did.
Show the folks at home.
I got some notes.
You got some numbers. You went
Yes.
to the archives for this, and yeah, this is one that's kind of been all over the place.
Yeah, and I was looking back at the numbers, and they started playing consistently. What, in 2011?
2011 Nebraska.
2011. So when you look back, there have been numbers all over the place, and obviously it goes back and forth. So the last time they were in Kinnick, it was 53 degrees.
It's a nice day in 2022.
It's pretty nice, warm afternoon there. And then when you go back to 2017, this was in Nebraska. It was 69 degrees, of course. And so then there are a couple notable ones that you get down to 2015. It was 24, which would be the coldest of those matchups since 2011.
That was Kirk with the stocking cap. I believe that cap got tossed at some point in that game.
And that one was in Nebraska, too.
That was
not even inside Kinnick. When we look back, though, definitely a big variation. We're looking at kickoff temperature of around 20 degrees right now. The wind chill will likely be close to maybe 10 degrees, and so it'll be feeling pretty cold. The wind's not going to be terribly strong, but the sun goes down, temperatures are going to go down, and this is also a byproduct of when you look at the dates on some of those later games when you're playing on the 28th or 29th, that's when you're seeing those colder temperatures. But then you have the 2013 game, which was against Michigan.
Yep,
it was 18 degrees at kickoff, so it could be very close. And if not, it likely would take the second spot because the other coldest ones that I found have been in 2018. It was 27 degrees. 2015 was 27. There was a 1991 game where it was 28 degrees, and in 1985 it was 25 degrees. I don't have all the opponents of those.
It's okay.
But those were all November games, of course. And then the other notable Iowa-Nebraska game was in 1896. Remember that one?
When Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
So 1896, which, how have they been playing football for that long?
Boy, I got a lot of history lessons to tell you if you think
it wasn't really
That's
football.
a long time.
You told me last year was 20. Do you have the wind chill for last year? Because it was freaking freezing. Me and Owen were at that game shooting it.
I don't,
in Lincoln,
but
yeah,
It was so windy. I was like, man, it was so
I mean,
cold.
26 that's pretty raw. So I mean, yeah, but then in 1896 it was 11 degrees that day. And that was in Nebraska.
That was in Nebraska as well. It is bizarre to have the 2020 season where you have games in December in Kinnick that didn't set the record.
Yeah.
Which is kind of par for the course for Iowa, right? Like you'd think those would be like the negative ones, but
Right.
no, it's still late November.
It's the November ones. And who decided like the 6:30 kick then? You know,
NBC.
Yeah, NBC.
Thanks, NBC.
in Iowa.
They don't care about us. They care about TV ratings.
You've already done so much research. I hate to even ask another question, but we talk about the kickoff times. That's the one that people a lot of times look at. But again, the game's going to get over probably around 10 o'clock.
Yes.
What would you be able to guess kind of what the temperature would be around that time?
Yeah, I had written that down too
Okay.
because it'll probably be close to about 16, 15 degrees, and then the wind chill will probably be in the single digits at that point.
Gotcha.
So
Neat.
it's gonna be really cold. So you gonna be out on the sidelines, guys?
That's the only solace we can take. Like, okay, we'll move around a little bit. Going to be layered
The
up.
solace is, well, at least we'll be outside.
Yeah.
At least we'll be experiencing
when
it.
we're cutting behind the benches, they've got the space heaters there, so you might walk a little slower as you're switching sides of the
Right.
field. Like, oh, this is nice. But
There was a Nebraska game though. What did I say? 1999.
yeah,
It was 92 degrees.
92 degrees.
Could have had that one.
Yeah, that was September. I think September
It was
4th. That was an
September.
early one.
different.
Eric Crouch ran all over. Is that year?
Yeah, I
99?
buried that memory. So yeah, I couldn't
No, that was
tell you,
2000
Mike.
That was 2001.
Not,
so it's
not familiar
probably
with the name. Not familiar with the man.
The best news is it's not gonna snow. So
Yeah, that's we'll take glass half full as much as we can. Weather first meteorologist,
Yeah.
chief meteorologist Rebecca Koopman, who's a Gator fan.
yeah, go Gators, but Hawks by a million, obviously.
There, she's indoctrinated. She knows. Thank you, Mike, using the sound.
She can't hear it, but
I meant to tell you to use the horn for her entrance, and I forgot. So you can't hear, but remember every song in 2010 had the burr, 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 burr. You just
Yep.
had that. Yeah, she doesn't have an IFB in one of these earpieces, but thank you. You're
welcome.
busy as heck. So you just recorded like 17 radio hits before this.
Yeah,
so
it's
thank you.
fine, but it was interesting to look at because I think it's definitely going to be it's going to go in history for probably one of the colder ones, if not tying for the coldest, at least the second coldest inside Kinnick.
And folks will still tell you that Minnesota at Minnesota in 2022 was colder, and I can attest to that.
was,
That was
yeah.
a fun one. That one broke Papa Steve. You're familiar with him.
Aw.
He doesn't
Well-
doesn't do outdoor games in November anymore.
Everybody stay warm. Hopefully they give everybody reason to cheer and
There you go.
be happy and
We'll
not
find-
miserable in the cold.
We'll find reasons for
Yeah.
kinetic energy. This is awesome. Thank you for doing this. I
welcome.
texted her last night. I was like, "You do a segment," or did I text you this morning?
It was a few hours ago.
Yeah. I was awoken, not to get totally off topic, and we've got a hard 11 o'clock out. She texted me at like 4:15 in the
rap.
morning about Bebop's coming back to Cedar Rapids, which thank you. That's
Big fan.
important.
Big
That's
fan.
yeah. And then I got to tell you how well people know me. I received multiple texts about Bebop's coming back to
That was the
Cedar
first thing
Rapids.
I thought of, but I just figured you would know.
And I was like, well, now that I'm up, do you want to be on the pod today?
Yeah, I just started asking questions because I knew you had some knowledge of the history of the temperatures.
Well,
so.
you're the one that does all the math and the
Yep.
science, so thank you very much. Appreciate
welcome.
it. All right, we'll switch back to football now, even though it's really important stuff. That's the STEM stuff, women in STEM. Keep it going.
This had come up in media discussions recently, and we can make this quick. Mike, you already kind of answered it, but in a media room recently, we talked about what's the coldest game you ever covered in sports world. Mike, yours I'm sure would be the Iowa-Nebraska game last year.
either that or in 2011 or 2012 when I was in college, I worked for ESPN, and I think I wrapped cords for a camera, and it was against Michigan, and it was freezing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always go back to that 2008 Penn State game. I was working for ESPN that day too. Wasn't even wrapping the cords. I was holding the cord for the red cap, for the commercial guy.
Sure.
And those temperatures I think were in the 30s. It was kind of spitting a little stuff. The winds were really strong. I was not dressed appropriately. I had
That's the thing. I
had
went to
no
that game
layers.
as a
It was
fan,
brutal.
and I was wearing a sweatshirt, so I was like, I don't put that up there just because I think I didn't. I should have wore a coat.
Yeah.
Mitch never dresses appropriately for the cold weather, frankly. So
I dress better. I layer, but they're thinner layers that stack well. But it was 2008. So anybody who was in Iowa City in 2008, you can picture this. I had a pair of Lucky jeans on and a North Face, and an ESPN vest. And believe it or not, that was not enough.
the ESPN vest doesn't
Yeah, those
provide
aren't
a lot of
insulated.
insulation.
Yeah.
I have one for college, one for the NFL. And for college, 2 years ago, that same day as the Iowa-Minnesota game, I was at the Iowa State, I think it was Texas Tech game, also freezing. And in the NFL, I was at the the year before the U.S. Bank Stadium opened for the Vikings, they were in the playoffs against the Seahawks. The Blair Walsh game.
I was at Pepino's in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and didn't had any reaction to Blair Walsh.
And that still is like the fourth coldest game in NFL history.
I remember them like knocking on the ground at TCF Bank Stadium. Like, this is concrete.
Bud Grant came out with a T-shirt on.
I remember, I
It was a wild time.
Oh,
Okay.
that was awesome.
Let's talk about football.
So Jackson Stratton, still your starter, but that quarterback room is full. Cade McNamara practicing. Brendan Sullivan practicing 2-3 weeks removed from doing an ankle that we thought was going to keep him out until the bowl game. But this is the walk-on from Southern California's team, and heard from him yesterday, really the first time we've got to talk to him at any media availability outside of post-UCLA and post-Maryland. We were not on those road trips, but here's Jackson, Mason Richman, Kirk Ferentz on really confident kid.
I could have imagined it, yeah. I mean, I'm confident in my abilities and I know what I need to do out there to play well, so yes, sir.
What's this last year been like for you overall?
It's been tough. I mean, the transfer portal, it was a crazy place to be in, just didn't know if I was going to end up eventually having a home, and just thank you to Coach Lester for bringing me in and giving me an opportunity.
He's done a great job, I think, being calm in the huddle. You've been able to see, I think, his growth and his confidence definitely spike. I mean, if the guy came into the year thinking he'd start a game, I think he'd be delirious, in my opinion. But, situations come up, and, he's been ready to go. I think that's the most important thing. He's not treating it like, I'm a backup, I can't do this. No, he understands what he can do. He understands what this team needs, and he's done a great job stepping up for our offense and, leading us in the huddle and stuff. He's, like I said, he's super calm, super stoic, not too high, not too low, no matter the moment, stuff like that. So it's been able to appreciate that a lot from him, and him being able to step in there is a big thing for us.
He's really done a good job, and I think probably the most amazing part from my vantage point is he's been a scout team player up until a couple of weeks ago, and so that's a lot to get thrown at you. Not that he's doing everything, but he's really handled it well. And as I mentioned Saturday, the fact that he had a week to think about it, week plus to think about it, that's one more hurdle to climb, because sometimes you start thinking about how did I get here? That what am I doing here? That can work against you a little bit too, but he just seems to be really steady. Unflappable is probably a strong word at this point because we don't know him that well, but he just handles things really in stride, and it's been impressive so far. So he didn't play perfect the other day, but he did a lot of really good things, and I was really impressed with his poise and ability not to get in trouble, which is easier said than done sometimes, especially at that position, because you're involved in every snap. The ball's in your hand every snap.
Let's set the rumors straight. Were you a scout team linebacker?
Nah, I've always been in a gold jersey out here. Yeah, I don't know where that started, but yes, sir, yeah.
You have no idea where that came from?
No, yeah, I don't know, but I'm sure just someone making a good story, but yeah.
Yeah, I'd say the story's still pretty darn good right now, though. A kid who, we were just talking during the soundbite, all those snaps he took at Colorado State, the 17 passes, those are all 2022. He didn't play at all last year. Wasn't expected to play this year. I mean, you heard Mason. If he came in here thinking he could start, might need to be checked. But, man, I talked to him for a minute and a half or so. You were with him a little longer, but that kid is not lacking in any self-esteem. And you love to see it. I mean, and he's already had in his, 21 dropbacks he's had. He's got every reason to be confident. There are some throws that we talked about on Monday, yeah, they're good.
It's the personality that fans exactly want to see out of their quarterback, and coaches want to see. Is that's a position where you want confidence. You don't exactly want the humble guy who's going to come there. Oh shucks, I'm doing okay. I'm all right. You kind of want a guy who's going to come out there with swagger.
I was. You didn't hear it from Kirk there. Kirk said Max White at one point was the number 2 quarterback.
Yeah,
and now he's number 4, and said he's not too happy.
What happened to Kyler? Was that just? Was it just?
My guess is Kyler is like...
Max played quarterback at Kennedy for all people who didn't know.
Kyler is the break glass, turn keys at the same time. Like, that's special codes to enter, like, if we absolutely need... The same thing, again, seeing Marco out there with the cast on... I mean, that's a club that's on his left arm right now. I think that was the same thing of just, like, if we absolutely need somebody, Marco is healthy enough to hold a football and maybe throw it or hand it off. But I think Max also, and maybe we talked about this on pod, like, he's the guy that's on offense, so he would know the playbook better than, Kyler played quarterback at North Scott. He's a DB now though, so you just think Max is just a little more familiar with personnel and signals and calls and all that. But again, he's QB4 now. What a tumble for Max White. But sounds like Kirk wants to have one quarterback. Jackson's the guy.
Yeah.
But boy, if you can get Brendan Sullivan back in there and get that red zone package again, that's
what I was
icing on the
curious
cake
about.
You didn't know you were going to get.
Because he's still coming back from an injury, and if
And it's an ankle injury.
And it's an ankle injury. So, do you want him running the red zone offense? The red zone was a shaky part of last week's game. You know, they had to settle for a lot of field goals. I know a lot of them were deep, but when you did get close to the goal line, you know, outside of a couple touchdowns, you know, they could have scored more touchdowns, frankly. So, do you want to risk injury again? It's the last regular season game. He'll have a lot of time to heal between now and the bowl game. It's just one of those tricky situations where I think if Jackson's healthy, you just play him depending on how healthy Brendan is, right?
Yeah.
I really wouldn't want to risk anything quarterback-wise unless you absolutely have to, unless Jackson gets injured, gets banged up somehow. I feel like they really want to keep him in for every single snap. The only thing I could see as an alternative, maybe on the goal line, is like if they're at the 1, the 2 yard line, take Jackson out and maybe have like Hayden Large take a snap, you know, just power through there.
I need Hayden Large to have a touchdown. I think we all do. It's going to heal a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, he's got 2 games left, 8 quarters for Hayden
I wonder if
Large.
there's another, and they haven't shown it all year, so this is just me vamping. If there is a player like a Caden Weegan or, you know, I'm trying to think, TJ Washington, who could just take a wildcat snap.
Sure.
I know in the bowl game a couple years ago, they put Sam Laporta in there, which so maybe Hayden Large. But I wonder if there's a red zone package where you can do that. But obviously, you like, ideally, the red zone package worked best when you could throw the ball.
Do you remember, speaking of that, I think it was Purdue last year, they tried to throw a pass to Mason? Do you remember that?
I actually don't remember that, but yeah.
Yeah, they tried to do that down near the goal line.
Okay, no.
Yeah,
And he had a broken leg at the time, right?
Yeah.
Or it was healing from a broken leg.
Can you imagine if he scores a touchdown, you find out 3 months later he has a broken leg? Good Lord. Would have been wild. I do wonder if you would still be able to put Brendan in there just as a decoy and just so there and get eyes keying and all that. And maybe we'll see.
You know, one thing that I did like, I don't think we mentioned it, was that they did run a QB sneak, and I don't think Iowa had the ability to, because, you know, with Cade, I don't know how effective that was, and they didn't actually really want to run a sneak when Brendan, there's more flexibility getting the ball and seeing with the hole. But that was a staple of the Iowa offense when Nate Stanley was here, and they got a first down on 4th down. So
like 6 or 7 yards. Nate Stanley career rushing yards were built on QB sneaks, and Spencer had a few pretty nice ones too.
But to go back to Jackson, like his footwork was really, really improved from week 1 to week 2, and I know he was a backup at Colorado State, so you come in, you're like, what the heck is this kid going to do? He made throws and he didn't make mistakes. Yep. And maybe the one, but it was a rollout and he was right into a defensive lineman. He got sacked, like not really a mistake. And then that one pass that was like 2 feet in front of him, like if that's your mistake, I'm fine with that because it's not going to result in a turnover.
What are your expectations for him? Nebraska's got a game worth of film on him too. Again, 16 dropbacks, it's not a ton of film, but what are your expectations for him going out here? A SoCal kid, brutal Iowa winter, getting cold, all that stuff. What are your expectations just with all the variables?
That is what concerns me a little bit more, is the fact that now Nebraska's had a chance to get a look at him, see him with a week's worth of practice and see what he's capable of. I think it's going to be a game where we probably see a similar style of production that we did against Maryland. I think that he's probably not going to throw 20 passes. I don't think he reaches 100 passing yards. I think it's going to be a game heavily built on the ground game once again for Iowa.
I will say, having watched Nebraska, and we'll talk about them in a little bit, USC hit a really big play action play on them. They were, pounded with Woody Marks, and they hit a play action where just Nebraska got sucked in. And we keep hearing about Jackson's arm. Didn't really see him air it out too far. Do wonder if there is an opportunity. I do think it's run heavy, but I wonder if there's an opportunity to finally Iowa fans see one over the top for a bit.
Wisconsin hit him deep. I can't remember. I don't think it was a play action. I can't remember, actually. I was rewatching the game last night. They hit him deep for a long touchdown, too.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think this Nebraska, I think they're going to sell out and say, beat us through the air. Now, can Iowa's offensive line still move them around? Like, Wisconsin was able to run a little bit. I think they went over 100. That might still be the case where Iowa will be able to run the ball on this team. Defense is better than Maryland. But if I'm, a betting man, they're gonna stack the box and say, let's see if Jackson Stratton can beat us. So I think he's gonna have to make a couple throws at least to move the ball. And if you can't, then maybe you're relying on some turnovers, which Dylan Raiola has been known to turn the ball over a little bit. So not saying they can't win without a deep shot, but it would obviously help.
Well, he's had the advantage of training against one of the best defenses in the country, even if those elite level expectations haven't exactly been met. They're still one of the top 20 defenses in the entire country, and had a lot of guys come back. The class that came back, guys like Jay Higgins, Nick Jackson, Sebastian Castro, Quinn Schulte, all these guys that came back. And what is their legacy? After a couple of years, Nick's only been here 2, but the legacy of guys who came back, set an impossible to match standard, let's be honest, as we look back. Jamari Harris, part of that group as well, who came back for a 6th year. There's 5 guys on the roster that have been at Iowa all 6 years. Their redshirt year was 2019. They're 51-22 as Hawkeyes. Have a chance to win 70% of their games if they can win out. What is the legacy of those, particularly those defenders that came back? You have a couple bumps in the road in 24, but in 22 and 23, and even going back to 21, you set a standard that people are going to talk about for a long time.
Yeah, it's particularly one of the classes that's going to still be remembered, as the last few have, on not exactly being defined by COVID, but at least playing through that, and their entire college career kind of starting in such a strange way, and being granted a little more eligibility because of that, but kind of playing through it and having the willingness to just roll with the punches when it comes down to it. And I think that 2 guys that I think do define that class are Nick and Jay. Just guys that, Nick comes to Iowa and becomes an Iowa guy very much. I feel like Hawkeye fans are always going to remember him, even though he's only spent 2 years here. Jay Higgins, a guy who, Kirk loves to wax poetic about Jay Higgins, just waiting in the wings behind Jack Campbell and learning everything that he possibly could, and now shining so brightly the last 2 years.
I think Jay Higgins will be remembered as a beloved Hawkeye.
Big time.
Like one of the few.
He's in that same breath as Jack
Campbell, yeah.
Anger.
Josie Jewell.
All those Mike linebackers. That's just
100%.
a special position that if you shine, you are enshrined, so to speak.
Yeah, and sneaky 4 interception season too. Like a middle linebacker doesn't do that.
Yeah.
And I think Nick obviously will too, but he just hasn't been here as long just because he's a transfer. But there will be a part of it that's shade. Like a lot of Hawkeye teams in the past 15 years, couldn't win that championship, which kind of stinks. Or maybe I should rephrase it to what if? What if they beat Michigan State, UCLA, 2 games they should have won?
Don't blow the lead against
I shouldn't say, Michigan State dominated the game, but on paper, they're they're fighting for a bowl game this week. UCLA, the same thing, they're a 5-win team right now. If they do in the position and beat the teams they should, could be a possible playoff on the line, which, okay, that's done and over, but I think a lot of fans will think back and think all you guys came back for a reason and it didn't pan out quite as much, but still, I think 9 wins if they can win this game and then beat a good SEC team in the bowl game. That's a pretty darn good year too.
53 wins over 6 years for those guys that have been, and even the guys that, Jay's only been here 5. I was trying to think of all the guys who had graphics built for them last year to come back, and so I asked him, is a 6th-year guy, and then Chad Leistikoff's next to me, he's like, 5th-year guy. But just an unbelievable, for those guys to go, if you're going back to 19, 10-3, 6-2 in the COVID year, 10-4, 8-5, 10-4, possibly 9-4. That was wild.
Yeah. It's a group, too, that when I look at the personalities, especially of the guys who are listed kind of at the bottom of the, as I look at it by class, there's all the grad students and so many that, again, Jay is a legendary guy and some that I think that we have some connections to, obviously. Quinn Schulte, you've heard Mitch talk about him. We love the Schulte family. Hayden Large is a guy that I know that I'm going to remember for a long time, just somebody that has a connection to my previous market I was working in, to your previous market you worked in, and somebody who, we were both, when he just transferred, we were like, we're getting a Dort kid, we're getting a Unity Christian guy, and just lived up to whatever people wanted out of Hayden Large as a fullback and as a tight end. We got it, and he's a guy I'm going to remember for a long time.
I think a guy like Seb Castro is going to be more remembered for what he does in the next league because I think he's so talented. I could see him being a slot corner or something like that and just a high-impact guy. And for whatever reason, he hasn't made that impact as much as he did this year. And it might be just, system, he missed a game. People people not throwing towards him and stuff. But in the NFL, you can't. I think they're probably going to challenge him early. So I think he's going to have an excellent career in the next level, whether his stock drop from last year or not. Someone's going to get a steal.
Is there another guy like that at Iowa who you can remember who is a defensive guy who made a difference at the NFL level?
Micah Hyde.
What's that?
Micah Hyde.
Okay. Who? I was just going to say who didn't have as much of a career. Is that Micah Hyde?
Oh,
He was a star here.
yeah, he was a star here. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a guy who kind of flew under the radar at Iowa was kind of,
Right.
I don't know, I feel like,
Seb didn't fly under the radar last year. I think he
sure,
is
sure.
this
And
year. But although like when he was out, you saw how important he was to that defense. So like he's just not getting the turnovers, and that's just a year-to-year thing. It's kind of hard to replicate that. So
yeah,
he's still played pretty well this year.
there aren't a lot of guys I feel like who, quote unquote, don't do a lot at Iowa and then go and like stick in the league.
On the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah,
tight
for
end.
sure. You know what? Yeah. We were talking about Luke Lachey might not hit 1,000 career receiving yards at Iowa, and you just imagine what he could end up doing in the
Might
NFL.
do at year one in the NFL.
We'll say this about Mike linebackers and interceptions. The 2015 season, Josie, his sophomore year, had 4 picks as well. I still remember Pat Anger in 08 had 5.
Wow.
And I still remember the ESPN graphic. I think it was for the Penn State game, maybe. Whatever headshot he took for that was just him with like this maniacal smile on his face, and that like. You knew Pat in college. That's Pat to a T right there. So it was fun to see. And that defense got to go up against the Nebraska offense that is 2 games into the Dana Holgorsen tenure as offensive coordinator, a guy whose name got floated out a little bit for maybe coming to Iowa City because he was born in Davenport, raised in Mount Pleasant, played college ball at St. Ambrose, then Iowa Wesleyan. He is a disciple of the air raid, playing for Hal Mum and Mike Leach, God rest his soul, the Pirate himself. And he is been showing some stuff off with the Huskers offense the last couple of weeks, particularly in a really, really convincing win. A really, if you're a Hawkeye fan, maybe an eyebrow-raising win over Wisconsin, the way they did it. Take a look at the numbers that Mike put together this morning. Those first 9 games of the season, averaging under 24 points, around 350 yards per game, passing yardage about 230, rushing yards 131. But you see these last 2 games, stats that really matter, yards per game, up almost 40 yards a game, and that scoring 9 more points. And again, that Wisconsin game was concerning to some extent because, as we were mentioning before the pod, Emmett Johnson, man, that kid, and Dante Dowell is a great one too. There's some weapons. There's some weapons on that defense or on that offense, and Nebraska's figuring out how to use them at a right time of year. They're bowl eligible.
Yeah, you do wonder. That's the main thing for me is I'm wondering how much there might be a little bit of a hangover after last week, after they finally get that bowl eligibility they've been trying for since 2016. Have they reached their peak, or are they able to continue that and carry it over into Iowa? I know that's a game that both sides want. I feel like maybe even sometimes Nebraska wants it more than Iowa, or like it's a rivalry that Nebraska cares about more in the sense that Iowa has so many big rivalry games. Nebraska doesn't have a Iowa State, as it were, a game that dates back like Michigan and Wisconsin, and so Nebraska maybe takes this rivalry at a different level than Hawkeyes do.
Yeah, and that Emmett Johnson, 113 yards on the ground and 85 through the air. So like he's a little weapon who I hadn't watched a lot of Nebraska, admittedly, up to last week, but I was looking at the stats, and he's not the leading rusher, and Dante Dowdell got more carries throughout the year, so I wonder if they're bringing more of this explosive back out, because he was pretty explosive. He
doesn't go down either.
Yeah.
He spun out of stuff. He doesn't go, and that's, with Iowa's.
What kind of tackling team we're going to get
exactly.
this Friday? That's what kind of concerns me.
I watched that, I'm like, oh no, like, is this like the perfect storm of a couple things? He just looked fantastic last week.
Dylan Raiola, he had 2 touchdown passes that were dropped too. There were a lot of drops last week, so it could have been worse. Although then I was thinking on Saturday, like, wow, this is kind of like, of course we're getting Nebraska right when they're hot. But remember, the Hawkeyes handled Wisconsin too, more so on the ground than through the air. I think Dylan Raiola almost had 300 yards passing last week. Only 1 touchdown. They got it through the ground. Dowdell had 3 touchdowns. That's he's still effective. But so I'm wondering, kind of, can our defense? I think our defense can do a lot better than Wisconsin did. Wisconsin played tough against Oregon that one week. I just wonder if they're all they were just bullied last week. So I wonder, like, how that's going to pan out. I think Iowa's defense does shape up better, but how can Iowa's offense attack Nebraska's defense? So that's where I'm at.
I'm also wondering what secondary. We talked about TJ Hall 2 years ago, gets thrown in the fire. Cooper DeJean goes out with an injury, a game that Iowa was already missing Sam Laporta, and Monty Potabon was out for that game too. The secondary, these receivers are tall, and we know Raiola can throw it around. Can Deshaun and TJ, John Nestor's back and healthy, had a really nice special teams tackle. Jalen Watson might get thrown in there as well, and safeties Quinn and X and Cohen. Are they up to the challenge? I think we're confident in that front seven, even though there have been lapses at times, if you want to call them those, throughout the year. But it's a big one. If Nebraska wants
That's
to
a good
attack,
point.
that might be the way to go.
If they could pick on TJ or pick on Deshaun.
He showed it against Maryland. He can make a play. It was
Like
really
Michigan State did to the other corners that were out there, then that bodes well for Nebraska, I think. I mean, it all depends on what those corners, if they can play a little better than they did in those 2 Iowa losses this season.
And I haven't had a chance to look at. I mean, we've got Jamar Harris is going to be out, obviously. I don't know for Nebraska how many guys they've got out at this point, or if we've heard if there's anybody that's going to be missing from their end of things, or if there's anybody that for them is going to be sitting out the end of the year, prepping for NFL draft, anything like that. But it seems like both squads are coming in relatively. Well, you don't want to say that Iowa's relatively healthy with everything that's happening at quarterback this year, but at least
And down a tackle, because they said Kirk said Jennings will be out.
Yeah, I forgot.
But again, that's the nice part. You've got a guy like Nick DeYoung, one of those 6th-year guys who can plug in. Ellsbury's played a ton. They love what Peep's doing. So you've got an offensive line that's playing really well. And again, that left side was really strong against Maryland. So hopefully that next man in can continue. Well, how about a guy who, even though he's from Kansas City, pretty familiar with this Nebraska rivalry between the Hawks and Huskers. Owen got some time to pick Mason Richman's brain, learn a little bit about the lineage of the connection to the rivalry, which I didn't know either. Great conversation. He's our Hawkeye highlight. He's played enough games by now. He's started more games on the line than any Hawkeye in history. Mason Richman rolling out there for 50-plus again on Black Friday. His conversation with Owen is this week's Hawkeye highlight.
Nebraska, does that game mean anything to you? I mean, as far as the rivalries go, anything special about Nebraska that you look forward to in this rivalry?
Yeah, I mean, this is my number one rivalry. I can't stand these guys. I respect them a lot, but there's a lot of family I have that we go play in Lincoln. They're still wearing red, and to me, it's just a testament to how storied their program's been. Obviously, they've had a really good year this year. Been impressive to watch. If we're not playing or the next opponent we're not playing isn't playing, I'll probably watch them most of the time. I've been hungry for this game. It's very exciting. I think we got a lot of guys in the room who understand that. There's a couple guys from Nebraska, a bunch of guys have played in this game. So, it's going to be physical. I think they do a great job on defense, and, I look forward to it every year just because, it's a little more personal to me from that area more than Wisconsin or Minnesota or something like that. But
do you wish that you were able to keep them out of a bowl game again? That maybe Wisconsin would be, and you could do it like you did last year?
I cheer against them every week. If Wisconsin, Minnesota, I don't care who's playing them. Iowa State could play them. I'd cheer for Iowa State somehow. But they are going to the bowl game. You got to give them credit. They've had a really good year. I know they've responded the last 2 or 3 weeks. I think they're on the climb up. But I think it's just everything's on the line for both teams, right? There's a trophy on the line at the end of the day, and pride. The state rivalry and stuff like that. But, they're going to be really – I think they're going to be ready to go. I hope they are, because I think we are too. And it's just about mentally just being able to handle the short week.
Why do you have all these Nebraska fans in your family? I forget, where are you from originally?
I'm from Kansas City, but my whole dad's side's from there. My dad played there.
Oh, your dad played in Nebraska?
Yeah, in the 80s, so long time ago. But,
really?
I grew up watching them too. It was just – they didn't care about me either. And it's fine by me. I've had a great career here, I think. And I'm so glad I became a Hawkeye and Hawk fan. Black and gold. Black looks better too. It's a lot slimming and everything. I'll have to wear those big white pants and look all fat and stuff.
Did your dad, was he an O-lineman too?
He's a safety. He's a lot shorter than me.
Really?
Yeah. I got it from his side though. I don't know how.
But he played for Osborne then back then?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it must have been. But
is he ever emotionally conflicted on these days?
Oh no, not anymore. He supports me through and through. That's the most important thing. I appreciate him for that. And he had a choice to make my grandpa, he lives in Kearney, and,
he's got black and gold on every Saturday instead of that gaudy red or whatever. And so it's a lot more personal to me. It's personal to a lot of guys on the team, I'm sure. But I think we're going to be ready to go. It's a big rivalry game. It'll be fun.
What about when you graduate? Then will your dad go back to being a Husker fan?
No.
He's a Hawkeye for life now?
And then my little brother's going to K-State, so he'll be wearing purple probably. But he loves the Hawks. He walks around with a lanyard around his neck every day, and it's been good. This last year was good. Obviously, these rivalry games, you get a whole year of bragging rights, so you can brag for a year until Friday night comes. And it's just that trophy sits in the middle of the field on whatever side it is, and it's up for grabs.
All right. Well, you heard him talking about John Richman, Mason's dad. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the boys get their height from somewhere else.
He's got, maybe it's not quite a foot, but that's like a good 7-8 inches on his dad there, I think.
Great T-shirt there, Mason. For those that can't see it, cold beer, live music, cash only. He's got low-key some really good T-shirts. I forget.
Shirt game.
He had some good hot dog one at some event over the summer that Iowa shared some pictures of. So John Richman, for those that don't know, Mason's dad is a golf pro in Overland Park, Kansas. So that's his handle there is J Richman PGA. So go ahead and follow John Richman on Twitter because he followed me a few years ago. My sister used to live in Overland Park, Kansas, not too far from that golf course. And I was like, why is a golf pro from the KC area following me? And then I put 2 and 2 together and figured it out. But heck of a story and heck of a rivalry, and that's the fun part about these games, especially on these senior days.
Boy, Mason really endeared himself to me during that little conversation because I hate Nebraska so much more than any other team in their rivalry series or in the Big Ten. And I don't know what it stems from. It goes into a lot of things. I think I've probably dated a few Nebraska fans that, there's not a ton of bitterness. I don't want to see them go through a lot of pain in life, but seeing their favorite team lose, I think, gives me a little bit of pleasure.
Do they live in Iowa?
I'm thinking specifically of a couple girls when I lived in Sioux City, so they actually would have been Nebraska fans. I think it's just the weird complex that they have that, like, there's so many good programs that were great in the 90s and won national titles and have just, like, moved on and, they're doing their thing now and they don't have to hang their hat on the 90s, but it's like Nebraska, like, that seriously is all that they have to talk about is like who they were in the 90s and under Tom Osborne. And it's like, you guys are living in the past. Like for the last decade, your program has been a punchline and they still like have this idea that they're like the big brother to every other team in the country. It drives me nuts. I freaking hate Huskers and Husker fans.
So this is obviously an Iowa podcast, so our fans are probably just eating up the hate. I have to stand up for some Nebraska fans. I used to hate Nebraska.
You had a lovely time in Lincoln.
I went to Lincoln on my birthday 3 years ago. In 2021, we went to the game, me and my buddy, and his dad absolutely despised Nebraska. We're both from, he's more Western than I am, but we're from Northwest Iowa as well. But when we went there, everyone was so darn nice. Like, it's so weird. We were tailgating. No one said a bad word to us. We get in the stadium, we're surrounded by Nebraska fans. They buy us 3 runs for whatever reason. Like, we had money. We didn't look like we were homeless because we were in the game, but I don't know. It was so weird. They're like, oh, you hungry? They come back and they get us one. And it's just like, at the time, Nebraska was winning. And then, in the fourth quarter, there was a special. Spencer Petras came back. There was a block punt, I believe.
Tyler Fisher
scored a touchdown.
Scored a touchdown on it.
It really changed my mind about them because I've been to Minnesota and they're absolute D's. Michigan fans were nice. Michigan State fans were nice. Penn State fans were half and half. I've been to like almost half the stadiums now, and I don't know what it. I mean, it's so weird, but don't let that change everyone else's hate. I don't like them. I don't like them when the game starts.
Didn't last year you get that? I don't know. Wasn't your opinion of Nebraska fans taken down a little bid after last year's game going over there? Or
there was a security guard who was just being a d-bag.
It's like, what'd you say? I mean, security guards just like shouting at the refs and, come on, man, he's holding them.
Which I thought was like
You're not
kosher.
supposed to do that.
Yeah. But like 3 of them were doing it. And then one of them was telling me, like my toe was on a line. Get behind the line. I'm like, that was the worst part of it. I'm like, what are you doing?
A few folks that really, literally and figuratively need you to be behind the line. Hopefully we haven't heard
people at Kinnick, much nicer.
Dylan Raiola is not helping either. I mean, that guy is so easy.
It's so bizarre when he's just trying to be a carbon copy of Patrick Mahomes.
Gosh, what a tool.
I really don't have an opinion on Nebraska. confession, I guess, if you want to call it that. I have a distant family connection on this year's Husker roster.
Oh.
My cousin's wife's brother is a starting offensive lineman for them, Henry Litovsky, who's a Mount Pleasant kid. So, and
Really?
I think I've told this story too as well. Back in, I think this would have been the late 90s, Blake Tiki from Cedar Rapids Jefferson went to Nebraska. And I remember that John Campbell on KCRG would do like big reports on Blake getting in for the Cornhuskers, because I mean, that was the golden era. And that was such a big deal that a kid from Cedar Rapids was playing for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And I remember that being a big, big
With all that said about Nebraska fans, I usually root for them to lose every week because I think it's the program sucking is funny to me. So it's not like I'm a Nebraska
like
fan.
Matt Rule too. Like I can't help but like pull for Matt Rule. He seems like just a fantastic leader and just a tremendous coach everywhere he's been for the most part. Like,
Yeah. I will say that I've got nothing against Rule. He seems like an all right guy, and I wish that he was not there because he seems like a good dude and a good coach who's going to get them pointed in the right direction.
We'll see, usually year 3, they're contending for conference championships, I believe, in his little history of coaching.
Baylor and Temple and all that, yeah.
It's interesting, a couple of other Eastern Iowa kids who have done well in Nebraska historically. A couple that come to mind, obviously, is Trev Alberts, who went to the now defunct NU High in Cedar Falls. And
He's from Eastern Iowa?
Yes, from Cedar Falls.
I did not know that.
Yep. And then obviously working at A&M now. And then Roger Craig, who went to Davenport Central, I believe, and then went on to have a great career at Nebraska and then in the NFL for a lot of years. There's a lot of Eastern Iowa ties, and that was a big deal back then. I mean, that really was like they're playing for an NFL team basically in the 80s and 90s. If you came out of Iowa and went to Nebraska, that was a huge deal.
Roger Craig, class of 79 at Central.
Yeah. I think that what really surprised me in that conversation with Mason, too, was that he was willing to even say, like, if Iowa State was playing Nebraska, I'd be rooting for Iowa State.
And that was like the one part of that conversation that he was almost like,
should I say this?
Say it?
Yeah, that's nearly blasphemous for any Hawkeye fan to hear a Hawkeye say that they'd root for Iowa State in any situation.
There are I think there are some like fans that after the Cyhawk, and I think it's on both, well, I don't know, it might be on both sides. It's like, let's care about the conference championship. Sure. And like, there's a lot of Hawkeye fans who Nebraska, Wisconsin, Minnesota, like dislike them almost a little bit more because it impacts whether you're going to do well in the Big Ten. I grew up in north but central Iowa with a lot of Cyclone fans, so I kind of don't fall in that line. But I will root for them on occasion. I don't want to see the Cyclones to make the Big 12 title game though. So.
Once the Cyhawk's over, you're like, okay, go 11-1, especially when you got everyone loved Dan McCarney, and he's an Iowa City guy, so I think people on this side of the state rooted for him too. Love Matt Campbell, going back to his days at Toledo and covering the MAC. I've never heard a bad word from folks that have been following him since he was in Toledo about the type of guy he is, type of program he wants to build, and has continued to build names. So, yeah, I just don't have hard opinions on a lot of these other college football programs. Speaking of hard opinions, picks time as we get into this. We are not the only Black Friday game out there. There's quite a few ones, and they're actually pretty good. 11 a.m. Friday on CBS 2, Minnesota at Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a 2-point favorite at home. Minnesota's already bowl eligible, took Penn State to the wire. If Wisconsin does not win this game, they will miss out on bowl eligibility for the first time since 2001.
Wow, really? I'm going to let you guys go first on these picks a lot. I've got some ground to make up, so I'd like to go against the majority with a lot of these, I think. So I kind of want to hear your guys' opinions before I jump into it. I am surprised. So Wisconsin's a favorite in this game?
2-point favorite.
That's crazy. With how bad they've looked, how are they a favorite against
That's a crazy line as well. Well, they did take Oregon to the wire last week.
Yes, but man.
If you're wondering about just the emotional letdown for Minnesota, if that factors into
that could be it.
So close.
Wisconsin has more to play for that bull streak. Yeah. But they are playing for the Axe, so either one can take
ask
that.
Anybody on either of those rosters.
This is a weird line to me, and so I'm going to pick Wisconsin just because I think Vegas knows.
I'm going to go Minnesota. I think it's wild how often Minnesota has won the Axe with Fleck there after so many years where they just, in 2005, don't bring up 2005 Minnesota, Wisconsin to Gopher fans, because that was, you get a punt blocked in the end zone that loses them the game. That was the same day as the USC Notre Dame Bush Push game. I remember watching Minnesota, Wisconsin, and that. Minnesota's had the upper hand for the better part of the last decade in this rivalry, so I'm going to take them to go into Wisconsin yet again. 2 years ago they did the same, I believe, and come out with the Axe, which is
They're 3-3 in the last 6 years.
Yeah, which again, 3 wins in 6 years is
Which
more than
doesn't
they
sound
had.
a lot, but then Wisconsin won like 12 in a row.
It was crazy. So I'll take the Gophers to go to 7-5 and take the Axe home.
I guess I've learned, if one thing, to ride the weird line. So I think I'm going to take Wisconsin 2 at home. Maybe that.
That's
again,
basically what I'm doing. I don't think Wisconsin. I think Minnesota's a better team, but I'm riding the weird line.
I mean, if Wisconsin wins this game, then both programs finish this year at 6-6.
Yeah.
Last week, Badger fans seem to really at least love that PJ Fleck and the Gophers kept it close with Penn State. Is anything at least getting a little bit warmer for PJ Fleck if he has a 6-6 year there?
I think you could say for both. I think Wisconsin, even though they have one of the toughest schedules in the country, if they don't make a bowl, that's 2 years and you fire your offensive coordinator who you were going to change the offense. Yeah. I think Wisconsin probably has more so than Minnesota, just because there hasn't been that recent. Now there has been recent success, but there hasn't been that tradition of going to Rose Bowls, contending for the Big Ten. So I'd say more so at Wisconsin than Minnesota.
Yeah, and Minnesota hasn't lost a bowl game since Fleck took over, and so if they finish 7-6 again, in Iowa, 7-6 will get you screamed at. Again, I feel like I say it once a month. It is so tough to win consistently up in the Twin Cities, and that's happened for the most part here over the last few years. So, speaking of weird lines, though, or at least a weird line if you were looking at Ohio State, Michigan with no context of what's happened in 2024, a game that you always figure is going to come down to the wire. Michigan at Ohio State, 11 a.m. Saturday on Fox 28. Ohio State is a 3-touchdown favorite. And if you're familiar with what's happened in 2024, probably rightfully so.
Yeah, 100%. Ohio State, the talent gap is wild. If anything, maybe if Mason Graham and that other D tackle, I'm blank on the name, can get pressure on an offensive line that's been banged up all year, if they can do that, maybe they have a chance to keep it within the spread. But I just don't see it. I think Ohio State's going to win and cover the spread.
Go ahead.
Samesies.
All right.
Owen?
Well, first off, both Michigan and Washington have reached 6 wins. So last year's national championship game contestants will play in a bowl game this year, as we were, I think, kind of rooting against that all season. But got to go against the majority, try to get some ground made up. So give me Michigan to keep it. I mean, genuinely, this is the game that Michigan could keep tight. If there was one in a really bad year for Michigan that they might make it a little more interesting than we might think, it's this one. So I genuinely do believe that Michigan could keep it within a couple touchdowns.
I'm rooting for it to be fun. I don't think it will be, but I'm rooting for it to be
Side
fun.
note on the 6 wins thing, and we got 12 minutes, so I shouldn't do a side note. Is a 6-6 the best team and I was going to beat that kind of record, 6-6?
We'll talk about that in a little bit with another pick coming up, but we're going to find out for sure. Illinois at Northwestern, 11 a.m. Saturday on BTN. The Illini trying to chase down a 9th regular season win. They are 7.5-point favorites against the Wildcats in Evanston.
Give me the Illini. They're just clearly better. Northwestern struggling this year, and even though this kind of rivalry game sometimes has some weird results, I think their momentum is just sky high, especially after that late win against Rutgers.
Go ahead, Mitch.
I'm not going to give you any more time. I'm taking
Come on.
Illinois. Taking Illinois again. That's such a sneaky good team, and what a win. You worry about the hangover from that one too, the good kind of hangover, I guess, if there is one. But yeah, just that's a darn good football team there.
Not that there's a lot for Northwestern to play for, but gosh, this gets harder and harder to pick. But give me Northwestern to keep it tight.
Boy,
Illinois had their ups and downs this year, and maybe they end on a low note.
Michigan State playing for bowl eligibility against that Rutgers team that lost in excruciating fashion to the Illini last week. Rutgers at Michigan State. Sparty, a 1.5-point favorite, 2:30 Saturday kick on FS1.
Classic rivalry game, right? On rivalry weekend, Rutgers, Michigan State.
Piscataway and East Lansing. Yeah.
Now, Michigan State's been that weird team. They obviously played really well against Iowa, beat them, struggled down the stretch. I'm going to pick Michigan State just because that's a home game, and I'm hedging a bet that I made. I have Rutgers going over, and I just need them 6 wins on the season, and they need to win this game. So I'm either going to be right here or I'm going to win some money.
I think it'll be Michigan State. Home game, Jonathan Smith getting the program going in a good direction. I think they can win this, win a bowl game, and finish 7-6. So I'll take Sparty.
I think Rutgers has been playing some good football lately. Kept it tight with Illinois, ranked Illinois team. They beat Maryland. They beat Minnesota in the last couple weeks. I think that Rutgers can even win this one outright, keep Michigan State out of a bowl game.
They're a tough read. Scarlet Knights have kind of been.
They really are. I
there,
mean,
yeah.
they are a weird team.
And we go now to Black Friday night, under the lights, a blackout at Kinnick Stadium. 6:30 kick on NBC. Nebraska at Iowa. The Hawkeyes 6-point favorite according to the numbers on ESPN. This opened on FanDuel at 4.5. I know it's moved up to 5.5 there. So that's a number that's been moving. But what do we think about?
I just checked on DraftKings. It's still 6.
Still 6, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I'll go ahead on this one because I think I know where you guys are going with your picks. But it does give me a little bit more hope. Again, I've talked about my Nebraska feelings. I think that I'm encouraged by the fact that Nebraska already made a bowl game. I think that gives them a little bit less mentally to play for. I think the last year's season finale really did. They were playing tough in that one and really wanted to make the bowl game, and Iowa kept them out of it. I think that Nebraska could keep it close. So give me Nebraska, but I think that Iowa could still win this one.
Yeah, I am going to pick Nebraska too. I think it's going to be a tight game. I don't see anyone blowing them out, but every time I say that, it usually, Iowa scores 40 points and wins by 20. But I just think this rivalry game, I don't think motivation is going to come into play a big factor. I think both teams every year don't like each other and they want to win, and there's a trophy involved. Did you know that Wisconsin and Nebraska have a trophy? I kind of forgot about that until I rewatched the game. Yeah. The Freedom Trophy. Dumb idea for a trophy. Anyway, I think Nebraska keeps it close. I'm a little scared at this new offensive coordinator for Nebraska, Dana Holgorsen. A little nervous that Raiola is going to be able to, hit his guys when I was playing, a little too deep, a little soft coverage. So I think they're going to be able to move the ball, and I think it all comes down to a little bit of an unknown of whether, our passing offense can succeed, or if we can just overwhelm them with the run. I'm not sure, so I'm going to pick the points, and I'm going to pick it close.
I'm interested to see how the secondary holds up. Like I said, Dana grew up an Iowa fan. Again, kid from Mount Pleasant. I'm wondering if there is a feeling of let's go into Kinnick and finally have maybe a moment he grew up dreaming about winning inside Kinnick Stadium. Iowa's just a different team at home, and they have dominated some pretty solid teams. That Wisconsin, whatever you think of Wisconsin this year, that Washington win. I think Iowa can cover. I don't know if it'll be I don't know if they can hang 40 like they have in some of those other ones, but even with Jackson, even if Brendan can get out and just be a decoy at anything, I think this is those 6-year guys, the class that came back. I think it's going to be a hell of a swan song for them in Iowa City, and I think they step up and the Heroes Trophy stays in Iowa City, and we'll just. What's the over/under for layers? Over/under for layers. I'm thinking 7.
3.5? Oh, 7?
I think I'm going to be at 6.
At some point, you're just like the Marshall. And don't give me. Just going back to the picks. I think Iowa has a good chance at winning the game. I just think 6. I was honestly expecting the spread to be 2 or 3. So I'm kind of surprised that it's sitting at 6 right now.
Sure, I get that.
Layers-wise, I don't do it very often, but I've got y'all know what a union suit is?
Is it from the war?
A union suit is the technical term for long johns, for the the red suit that you
the onesie.
Exactly. So I've got one of those. The only time I've ever actually worn it was for that Iowa State Texas Tech game a couple years ago. But I think that it's probably going to make an appearance again on Friday.
But it's red.
It's so well hidden that it doesn't factor in. If there's enough layers on top of it, it doesn't count. I like to wear slacks to games usually, look a little bit nicer, but I think the jeans are going to be called for this time around. Maybe even wear, I've got leggings right now that I use.
I would wear sweatpants if I were you guys.
Under your jeans or something?
I'd wear long johns, I'd wear sweats, and then that's what I would do if I were going to the game. But I am a wuss when it comes to cold, so,
If there's no wind, and it sounds like the wind won't be as
or
bad.
Carhartts,
I can,
overalls.
I don't have any Carhartts. You'd think I would as a...
Tyson's is down the road. No free commercials. You can go to Menards too.
NIL deal with Tyson.
Tops, undershirt, probably some sort of polo or whatever, sweatshirt,
You don't need a
hoodie.
collar. You don't need a collar.
You're not going to see it anyway, it's true. Hoodie, and then our heavy station coat.
Yeah, there you go.
Probably get the scarf out, get the stocking hat, nice pair of gloves. I think that's the plan of attack. Don't know what shoe wear I'm going to go with.
Do you layer gloves ever?
I don't.
I'll probably have 2 pairs of
That's
gloves.
not a bad idea, though. I know.
I've got like one of those lighter, almost like the ones you just throw on your kids if they don't have mittens, like those little kind of lighter ones. And then I've got like a good pair of not industrial gloves, but they're running gloves actually. They have a little slot that you're supposed to hold like your key in if you're out for a run, which don't run by the Cedar River with that because the pocket is faulty. I won't blame the brand, but learned that last year.
Not a sponsor.
Never will be.
I'm not a hand warmer guy either. Some
the same
folks like it, but it's like my fingers are what gets cold, and so the hand warmer is not doing anything for your fingers. So
My feet are the ones that, like, I can handle everything else. Somehow the warmth all stays here, but yeah.
the toes, yeah.
These are the problems we will deal with on Friday.
Going to be an interesting day.
We got a hard out.
Yeah, Mike's going to play us out. Hey, hope you guys had fun. We were a little loopy this early on a Wednesday. We'll see you Friday. We're going to do the 10 o'clock Saturday podcast to recap. We'll get up early and recap everything for you and then go enjoy our holidays. You know the deal. Back here on the Iowa News Now YouTube channel then. Thanks for joining us on Eye on the Hawks.